didn't put the chicken assist on it.
Stay tuned for Airgun Detectives. Welcome to a special episode of Airgun Detectives. I'm your host, JC, and today we get to take the mystery out of the trigger on the Benjamin Trail NP Mark II. If you guys remember my original review, I told you that I was going to look into this trigger, and I did, and I mastered it, and I'm going to share it with you how I did that. So before we get going on that, do me a favor, if you hadn't already, hit the subscribe button down below there. I would really appreciate it. It doesn't cost you anything. It's absolutely free, but it really supports the channel. Also, don't forget to check out my website, www.airgundetectives.com. On that site, got t-shirts, ball caps, Generation 2 bipods, a few things like that. So go ahead and check that out when you have time. All right, let's get back to the Benjamin Mark II. Told you guys that I was going to look into this, and I did, and I mastered it. And I'm going to show you how to lighten up your trigger on it. Before we get into that, though, first let's take a quick look back at the original review, what the trigger's like out of the box. Take a quick look at that. All right, let's test the trigger weight on our Benjamin Trail NP, our Mark II here, and see how much weight we actually have. I can tell you up front, it's a pretty heavy trigger. You can, however, fill the two stages. You can fill the first stage and the second stage. So this is completely stock. I haven't looked into it about how I can alter it or lighten it. That will be my next project, but I will look into it at some point. But let's just see how it is right out of the box. Have our trusty Lyman trigger gauge here. All right, let's see how we do. All right, that's 6 pounds, 2 ounces. 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Okay, so first thing I'm going to tell you is don't attempt to do this unless you are a professional or you're really proficient at working on air guns. Okay, so that's just your warning. All right, now let me show you what the results were after I did my trigger modification. Go ahead and take a quick look at this. Okay, now I'm going to show you guys the results of my upgraded trigger. And I'm telling you it wasn't this difficult. I'll explain more of it as we go through the process. But what I really like about this trigger, it is a true two-stage trigger. Some of the write-ups I've since listed as a single stage. It is not a single stage trigger. It is a two-stage trigger, clearly. And I have this set up. When I pull with this trigger gauge, notice how soft the first stage is. And then you're going to watch the trigger come back, and then it's going to hit a wall. I love that when it hits a wall. And then just a little bit more pressure, and you know the gun's going to go off every time. So it's very controlled. So it's actually, this has turned out to be a great trigger now. Now watch this. We got our trusty Lyman trigger gauge here. All right. Now watch as I pull this. See the first stage? Look at the first stage. See it come up? Right to there. See it? Right there. That's the first stage. And then you finish it with the second stage, which is right here. And that is 2 pounds, 9.8 ounces. 2 pounds, 9.8 ounces. So we're under 3 pounds. And think about it. It was 6 pounds to start with. Okay, so stay tuned. Now I'm going to give you details on how you do this. Okay, you saw it. The trigger now breaks under 3 pounds. And it's a pretty simple process, but I'm warning you again, do not attempt this unless you're extreme professional at working on air guns. I don't want emails, I don't want messages telling me I took my trigger apart and I can't get it back together, because I'm not going to help you with it. So I'm going to hope I have enough information on this video that'll help you guys out. But again, I'm going to warn you, do not do this unless you're extremely proficient with air guns. Okay, the first thing you're going to need to do, obviously, and if I even have to tell you how to do it, you have no business even messing with your trigger. Take the assembly out of the stock. Okay, and what's going to be exposed there now is you're going to see it's a metal housing with the trigger. The trigger is in front. You see the little spring sticking up there. You can see the back portion of it. This is what the spring's going to look like. It's this simple. You're going to remove that first spring, and then you're going to put it back together. This is the basic process. You just remove this spring and then reassemble it.
And be very careful with that trigger spring. There's a spring on the very front of the trigger, and you'll see it sticks out. That's for your safety. That keeps the tension on the safety so it goes back and forth. But seriously, all you're going to have to do is remove that first spring. And the way you're going to do it is you got to pull out 2 of those pins. And I always like to take a photograph of the whole trigger assembly before I start messing with it. And then as I go through it, I take another photograph. And this is, if you get to that point and go, oh my God, where does this go or where does that go? Take several photos. With these phones you have nowadays, it doesn't cost you anything. Just take different photos of the different angles so then you have a reference point to go back to. So the basic process is simply take that spring out, put it back together, you're done. It's going to cut your trigger weight in half. That's it. Now, if you want to go extremely advanced, this is what I did. I took the whole assembly apart. And it gets very complicated when you take that third pin out. Very complicated because there's 2 springs that go in the back. And one is going to go below that bar and another is going to go above the bar. So anyway, it's a much more complicated process. But what I did is I took those pieces out and I polished all the contact points. Got them really, really smooth. Then I greased them up, reassembled it. And now, oh my goodness, is it a trigger. It works great. But it's like anything, you have to go slow when you're doing this stuff and don't forget how it's originally put together. So I'll list some different photos obviously up here that I've got going behind me here. But you really need to pay attention to how it goes back together. But again, you have your basic is just remove the spring. That's it. Put it back together and your trigger is going to be so much better. Or you can go the advanced method, which some of you are really good at working on air guns, and then you can polish your pieces and then put it back together. Now keep in mind, I kept that stock adjustment screw, and you can play with that because you can absolutely eliminate the first stage if you want to, which I think you'd be absolutely silly to do that. But I even polished the tip of that screw. So you're going to have to play with that screw because it just might take just a couple of turns on it where it's barely sticking out, and it'll give you just enough lightness in that trigger. So in other words, it's that very soft, that first take up. And I love that. So that way it becomes very predictable. So it's very soft, comes up against the wall. Then you know a little bit more pressure on that trigger. And mine now is under 3 pounds. You just put a little bit more pressure on it and the trigger fires. But this has no impact as far, removing this spring has no impact on the sear or the pressure on the cocking arm. Nothing. This strictly just takes some pressure off the trigger. The other 2 springs, you want to leave those completely intact. And if you do take it apart, then you got to put those back together. But the key is just remove the 1 spring, just this guy. This is all you need to remove. And it'll smooth out this gun. You'll take it from a 6 pound to a 3 pound. So anyway, but do this at your own risk. Okay? I'm just providing the information to you. You do it however you please. All right. So hopefully we took the mystery out of that trigger for you. So once again, don't forget, this is where we take the mystery out of all the air guns. And I really appreciate you tuning in. So until next time, be safe, God bless, and I hope you get plenty of shooting in. Take care now.